Okay, good. Yeah, hopefully this will be good. Yeah, it's kind of like getting into doing some my thoughts about the legal media and what deposition is and all that stuff. Um, so anyway, yeah, I kind of like I'm getting into the part about the alphanumerics and linguistics and all the terminology and normally a practical application and integration in a way of principle and something about all that in combination with what the in circuit means or maybe even incorporation or really not or degree level of what opportunity might even mean of international law of having fair use as a excess easement and what that means in isometrics and international banking systems and a degree level ultimately seemingly in my mind very much so of um, here recently I've been looking at the being venue thing about Geneva, Switzerland, and some of the terminology in reference in bibliography as well as like real estate law and other types of corporate and business law and the compatibility in that way with U.S. patents and trademarks and the difference in why it's normally U.S. patents, copyrights, and trademarks, or what that thing about the Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency and the bicentennial quarter in a way an alignment parallel universe and there had been some like things that I've been really concentrating my time on in that way because of uh, you know um, something about the litigation and the de facto in a way of what an alignment parallel universe is and how the light defines the meaning whether or not if any litigation would be defined as class action or what that means to not necessarily demographics in a way of maybe the perception of what a standard practice in political science might suggest of like whether or not an on-site would be an issue of a fixture and what type of fixture if it's going to be a real estate issue normally of residential as compared to commercial normally identified as a type of venue not limited to living quarters in a way that still has the quarter thing about the alphanumerics of 100 or even the bicentennial quarter in that way with the cumulative rollover into the new millennium, the year 2000. Okay, and there's something about that going in. This is the year 2023, and I've been like looking at a lot of stuff about how the patent and is in. Now it's kind of like I've been thinking about the word. It seems to be the word relational of either Python or the lizard, okay, and how architecture and platform embedding and encryption, like the big four, about the computer programming and how Python and and the lizard, okay, it's almost like a binary issue between the lizard being representative of the desert, okay, and Paradigm, it depends, the alphanumerics of 71 is like the way it's spelled as 71, okay, desert and dessert and all that stuff in between the S thing, okay, and in any case, so like I was looking at that in that way because of um, the word relational, and that's like you know um, international law uses the word relationship quite a bit um, in a professional manner, and likewise, in addition, is a terminology that normally involves a degree level of whether or not if the lizard itself and the python is really ultimately getting to the thing of whether or not the level degree level of opportunity is really the issue of what third person or intellectual or what easement means in a way of totally suggesting that the participation is acknowledged, whether or not the isometric is a factor of a transaction in a bank that actually goes beyond the flat plane surface, um, identifying actual participation, like isometric suggests like on the flat plane surface, a two-dimensional flat plane surface normally and what that means in isometrics of actual participation with a three-dimensional effect of projected essence options and future in that way, a symbolic representation that really I've been kind of like getting into as well as the thing about the Peking, as a matter of fact, Beijing, and Korea, and a Korean thing being 64, and an American, and um, Peking being like a 62, like dollar, and the connectivity. It seems to be the book, is really the year in June of 1992, I really started looking for a lot of um, answers in a way of alphanumerics with geographics. And 1992 stressed on like the United States, a map with some horizontal rectangles. Okay, and my thing about the rectangle, I mean, if it's really going to get to the issue of scale motor or what absolute value is in the way of the two vertical bars, okay, and Brazoria, the county, in Pearland, Texas, and right south on the border of like Houston, Texas, and all that alphanumerics of like 181 and electronic power and we international and it goes on about alphanumerics USA and attenuation USA and all that stuff. Well, anyway, so like the thing about the attenuation, it had gotten into how something in my mind of like the Jewish language in the way of normally based upon my perception, and it's only because I'm like only going on my memory. It's not that I've went any further than that of like knowing that normally Jewish and certain factors of like Christianity identify like Jews as the chosen elect of God, right? So anyway, a lot of about that translation normally originating based upon Hebrew and Greek in that way. And there's something about the U.S. dollar in that way, or what de facto, even de facto in litigation, and what the light means um, in dissipation and photoconductive materialist way. Or like I had mentioned a little bit earlier about the tribe of Reuben um, in the King James Version Bible of Christianity, the 12 tribes of Israel, one of them being the tribe of Reuben. And the way it's spelled in the King James Version Bible is like Reubin is like 69, okay, and Texas Jehovah. And the thing about the US dollar below the equator, and it seems to be like the deal about the translation between what that is in Hebrew and Greek in a way of like absolute Christianity, or in my thought Brazoria being like 90 and a 90-degree right angle, and a 90-degree right angle is normally like a quadrant anyway. I mean, it can go on to you probably heard before the infinite thing about the line, okay, and well anyway, in that way, what that really means, and ultimately it gets to like the quadrants, ultimately getting into the spherical quadrants, and um, like a perpendicular spiral that it kind of goes all the way back to like elementary school, and that Meade spiral notebook and marginal spread seems to be the significant thing about the two lines, and what the marginal spread is like on the tennis court, depending upon how many players are on the court in Vantage Love 30 is like a real big deal to like really focus on, because I think there was only two times in my entire life on Wide World of Sports that I'd ever heard any tennis match. And it happened to be, the Wide World of Sports, ABC Wide World of Sports. And it's like in my memory, it's like I only heard that twice in my entire lifetime about Vantage Love 30. Or Vantage Love really anything, but predominantly even more so with the Vantage Love 30. In any case, so it gets back to the Hebrew and Jewish thing about the Hebrew and Greek that I'm looking at similarities of like Peking and Korea, and how Peking in my mind is it has the five circles for like when the Olympics, it's like in Beijing. Um, anyway, it's like I think it's like four or five intersects with all those rings. Anyway, I'm gonna have to think, but that's not my point right now. But it seems to be like the Audi thing about the three intersecting axes, normally identified, is in like geographic informations and cartology before it gets in beyond the two-dimensional thing into the card- cartographic 3D imagery of like geographic information systems, and it gets into all that plane horizon stuff. Well, anyway, I was looking at the thought about the similarities of Peking and Korea, and the Oriental thing about that, and Japanese being like a 71 in Pearland, and it seemed to be like the star furniture, different by design. It's going through all of the computation and looking for everything in any symbolic way, unlike anything that really I decided to because of the US $1 and all the computation on the backside above the pyramid, or the eye being referred to as a deity. And that's normal information that can be obtained, through the United States Treasury, that the eye is normally identified as a deity. Um, in any case, yeah. So it's like it ultimately gets to something about the eagle in the way of what the pyramid only having the one eye. Um, but I've seen it before, the left wing and the right thing, the right wing about the eagle, and the one eye, facing either way. And it's ultimately getting to like somewhere in mind about the um, Austin Powers Blue Bonnet and the Imperial Eagle, in that way ultimately getting to Geneva, Switzerland, all the way back to the summit meetings and the peaking of, like, like a peak and a crest, like the eye is on top of the pyramid, the peak. Like I say, it's like getting to the impedance and ambience on the 13 graphic band equalizer and the night vision, ultimately of nanoluminous, and the pastel thing about being 73 Egypt and Harris, and how the US dollar um, is getting to ultimately, the thing whether or not if Moses, being the deal, and ultimately on the Nile, and it was really the Euphrates, and both really, and anyway. So ultimately, it's getting to the thing about Sarah and Sahara, in my mind about the lizard, okay, of like computer programming, um, of the lizard that's on the book, and the word relational seems to be like one of the biggest word with the book with the lizard in it in Python. How true it is about that one word, but the relational thing about the lizard is so much. The lizard that's on the cover is very much the one about the desert, and ultimately getting to the 71 in Pearland thing. Okay, well, anyway, it's kind of like it ultimately gets to like Sarah in the King James Version Bible, and the lizard being the desert, and that thing about the pyramid being like the Sahara, and Sarah, okay, in combination with like the desert being 71 in Pearland, and Sarah, okay, biblically referenced in the King James Version Bible. And there's like a lot of stuff I'm looking at. Anyway, I'm going to keep this kind of short right now, but I'm kind of like looking towards that direction in that way because of like I say, there's structure. I think there's three or four of the Japanese letters. According to the information, I think there's only like 22 letters in the Japanese alphabet. To me, it's like I was speaking to several people about it, and like it looks more symbolic. And whether or not if the nativity point of origin is the only issue of like geographically attaching what information being provided, like a degree level of opportunity, or what having fair use means in international law of access easements, and if that's limited or placed upon whether or not that it's going to go beyond maritime law, and what a tariff is to protecting, the aggregate in a way of like import and exporting like gross national product, and importing and exporting on international level, and what maritime law is, based upon, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, as compared to maybe aeronautics that would get into space exploration, and including, like the atmosphere in a way, ultimately getting to the seven layers of the atmosphere. And yeah, all right, and the Statue of Liberty in the way of like what nativity point of origin means to like the American Indian, and American history in the way, ultimately getting to the 13 colonies, and yay, the 13 stars thing. So like I'm like really just now trying to start to combine all that alphanumeric and linguistic and practical application in that way. I'm kind of looking that way right now, and how Israel and 64, and, and like an American as compared to Korean, um, the difference between like Japanese and American orientation in a way. Anyway, there's like the three or four like letters of the Japanese alphabet that's symbolic to structure and quantum of attenuation, and measuring the the digital signal processing speed of waveform, of special effects. It goes beyond what, the United States Supreme Court normally would maybe suggest is maybe the limit of a 13 band graphic equalizer, where attenuation only speeds up the frequency, not really anything other than the frequency normally of verbal content, not necessarily a special effect, or really in need of processing in the way of special effect, other than what attenuation might suggest is processing speed to frequency, which is normally um, a spectrum that is chosen in bandwidth for like a 13 band graphic equalizer, as compared to like, digital signal processing in waveform. And it gets into quite a bit of what would only be like maybe a little bit beyond two-dimensional application to the real um, waveform of like, three-dimensional participation, what human capital in a way of practical application, and alphanumerics and linguistics with that um, thing about it. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to try and get this real quick, and stop right there right now to make sure it's within. I just want to say before I go any further. Okay, great, there it is. Yeah.